Welcome back, my friends, to the sweet spot where IT leaders share the insight with other leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Vargas, and as in every week, I have my two co-hosts, Hart Holton and Paul Lewis. Hello, guys. Hey, what's happening with you? Now, guys, just joking. This week they were together. Paul and Howard were in Atlanta together, and we have a special guest for you today. So I was listening through the event, the recording and everything, and it was awesome to hear the conversation. And they were putting something there, they wanted me to edit it, but I think that to dive directly into it, the way that it went through, it's perfect for. So this is our first episode with Meet the Viewers. Let's go there.
We can figure it out, we can go back and forth, I don't think it's that mission critical.
Yeah, but Mr. Vargas now has to edit everything we're about to say.
Yeah, so how do we make it the hardest we possibly can for him? Right?
Let's just keep moving.
That's gonna be the fun part. Yeah. Keep sliding left and right. Just slowly do this. Eventually move off screen.
Right.
All right. So I think our viewers know us well enough at this point that Paul and I don't need to do an introduction, but why don't you introduce yourself?
Meet our viewer.
What?
Yeah, this is our first Meet a Viewer episode.
I was wondering.
I guess
about
it's
that.
Meet Our Viewer, because he probably is the one we have.
Yes, I am one of the one that you have.
One of the one,
Yep,
yeah.
exactly. So I'm Rance Carr. So basically, grew up in South Alabama, spent most of my life there. I have lived in Georgia for the last 25 years. Most of my career, or the first part of my career, was spent in manufacturing. So as a production manager, shipping manager, receiving manager, materials manager, you name it, manager-wise, and I probably have done it. And then the last 10 years or 11 years has been spent in IT. So I moved over to IT as part of the Oracle EBS. I don't know if can I say Oracle. As part of Oracle EBS implementation, and then I've stayed. So several opportunities to go back to the business, but kind of what I started realizing was I can have more impact on the business from an IT position than I actually could from a single plant position. And so that's the reason I liked IT, and that's the reason I wanted to stay here.
So outside of kind of impact to the business, right? What else do you like about IT?
I really like working with the people. So it's as strange as it sounds, I know it's a technology, but in the role that I've been given, or the role that I've worked in for the last lot of years, I've worked with a vast number of people, throughout the globe. Geography-wise, I've traveled a lot. I've worked with a lot of different cultures and the different types of people. So that's what I've enjoyed.
You have the same type of role as, like at a hospital, there's a chief medical information officer, right? So it's in many ways a peer to the CIO, but they also have a practice, right? So they're also a doctor. They might in fact work in the hospital. And their role is to say, I know how to be a practitioner, and I'm going to help you translate that into IT so that IT can actually make me work better, faster, cheaper, better.
And so that's exactly what I think my sweet spot's always been, is I have the understanding of the business, and the business, when they explain things to me, I can understand what they mean, translate that over to IT so that we can code or do whatever we need to do, or take IT requirements and translate that back to the business so they can understand clearly what we're trying to accomplish or what we're saying.
So it's a well-used phrase, so I'm going to ask you specifically what you mean when you say that. When you know the business, describe that. What's the business to you?
Well, coming out of, especially here at the company I'm working for now, I've actually was in one of their manufacturing facilities, making the product, shipping the product, receiving the product. So, whether they're coming to me asking me about, hey, I need a report for scrap based on these parameters, because I've been there, I'm able to take those parameters and explain to an IT guy who may not even know what they're even talking about when you're talking about scrapping out product. I mean, a lot of our guys have never been in the facilities. They don't have that experience. They're purely IT. So, and even in the role today, and I've told Howard in the past, I mean, 2017, we had a plant that had some problems, and they came and got me out of IT, and I went back to a plant for 4 months. And basically had to go back into the process side of things and helping to work on that plant.
If we went to your house, went to your garage, would we see a lot of packing peanuts?
But you see a lot of packing peanuts.
That you took from the manufacturing plant?
Packing peanuts.
That's an odd question. I don't know that I get it either.
I said no curveballs during this discussion. We're talking packing peanuts. Okay, Paul.
Yeah, so from my perspective, like I think it's worth it for our viewers to know that you and I work together now, right?
Correct.
And I came here 6 months ago. We'll keep here a little confidential. And first thing I did, right? I met everybody and had a conversation with my supervisor and said, Rance is my number 2. And he said, do you think Rance would be willing to do that? And I said, well, considering I talked to him about it and already asked, yes.
It's already been implemented. I'm just informing you.
Yeah, it's kind of that. And from my perspective, walking into a new organization, walking into a new company, walking into a different industry than I've been in before, because I don't have any manufacturing experience, it's been invaluable having someone that not just understands the business, but people are confusing to me. People don't come naturally to me. I work very hard to be personable. I don't really know anybody that we could call to interview about how I was before I learned how to be personable. Not sure they'd take the call. Surprised some do now anyway.
Fair enough.
But it wasn't that bad. I was just an awkward person. So my question for you, before we get into your questions for us as our viewer, is if somebody currently is in IT, right, currently is a viewer and wants to become a leader, right? Leadership, you have to be personable, right? Leadership is 90% empathy. What are like some techniques or tricks or tips or advice that you would give to somebody who doesn't feel that they're personable in becoming personable? Because you're really, really good at it.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you've had this conversation quite a few times, and I always knew I was good at it, but I didn't know I was really good at it. And so,
I mean, no, you're terrible at it. It has no market value whatsoever.
exactly. And so I never really thought about it, but I have been thinking about it over the last few weeks or so. And so I would say there's 3 things that I would kind of put on it. Number one, I think you have to establish trust. And so to establish trust, you have to open yourself up to people.
Yep.
So unless you're open, then the person you're trying to develop the relationship is not going to be open. They're going to be guarded also. So I think I try to, and I don't always do a good job of it, but I think for the most part, I try to be very open with people, to get them to open up with me so that I can start learning about them. So I'd say that's number one. Number 2, I would say active listener. But it's not just listening to spoken language, it's also visual. So you're sitting here, you're in the office, you're looking around, guy's got golf memorabilia. Guess what? He's an avid golfer. It's a good thing to be talking about when you're talking to him. Bring it up, ask him about it. Hey, the lady that sits next to you wears a different pair of shoes every day. They're fabulous. Guess what? She's proud of them. She'll love to talk to you about them. So you start getting those things. So, but the most, but it's odd because I remember a lot of those facts, but I'm terrible with names. And I can't do it. So we had a vendor in here earlier this week. The guy who was leading the discussions that we were having, I cannot tell you what his name is. What I can tell you is he was raised in New Orleans. He went to LSU University. Him and his wife currently live in Nebraska. I don't know what his name is.
Thomas.
Thomas, there you go.
Rants. That's the weird part.
So, you start picking up those. Or Paul. So I met Paul personally for the first time this morning. But I know he's a big Disney fan. I know that
The
his
technical term is Disney dork.
Disney dork. His daughter has started college,
Right.
because I remember when on the show that he was going through and starting to tour the colleges. And the one thing that he
too.
was looking forward to when he came to Atlanta was the Friends experience that nobody
true.
else in Atlanta knew even existed.
That's true. And I do think on the next episode, Paul will have to regale us with
That's right.
how the Friends experience went.
The complete walkthrough. I will
Yeah.
sit in the cafe on the couch. It's going to be a whole deal.
Or, you take Howard. So what do you know about Howard? He's a collector. So whether it's whiskey, whether it's comic books, whether it's watches, whether it's Bibles, severed heads,
Cars.
Howard collects it. He really doesn't collect severed heads, but
But I do collect Bibles.
But
I do collect chessboards. I do collect watches. I do collect books,
cars,
and comic books, and
motorcycles.
cars. And,
But ask him about the severed head if you ever meet him. He'd be love to tell you about that. It's a big collection. So that's my, it's a big collection.
Isn't one a big collection? Like, isn't
Of
that
severed heads?
Yeah, severed heads.
of severed heads? I think one is a big
I don't
collection.
know. If you have one severed head, you gotta have two. I mean,
You gotta have two.
one's not enough.
So when you say severed head, I immediately think human. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, it's human.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
It's human.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think one is a pretty big collection compared to the world of collectors.
There's the
of things.
showcase head, and then the one you keep in the back. Right?
If you got one
The one
head,
you keep on the nightstand.
if you got one head, you're guaranteed to have two.
Okay.
What the
Yeah.
heck?
Why stop there?
Yeah.
Murder's murder. Why stop there?
So that's active listener. So that's number two, and then number three, I really believe that everybody and every business does something well,
Yeah.
and so they excel at stuff. So if you can understand what they excel at, and if you have an opportunity to point it out or compliment it, then if you ever have to have a conversation that's negative, it's a lot easier for them to take. It's a lot easier to have that discussion. So where does this get us? Where this gets us is developing a business-personal relationship, which is the foundation for developing a business relationship. And so if you can develop the personal business relationship, then it makes it sticky, makes it strong, and it's much better than just having a business relationship. You're subject to fail with a business relationship. Times get tough, they're out.
Business is a reasonably new invention in human history, right? Hunter-gatherers, which is where we spent most of our time, they don't have businesses, right? There's no concept of it, right? Money doesn't have value. It's a purely trade situation. And it kind of plays into the whole psychology of people. Like, at what point does another person become a person within your subconscious? Right. I've talked a bit about the study they did in New York to determine, like, why are people so rude in New York? And what they figured out is there's a limited number of people that you can interact with and see as people in one kind of day period. And that in New York, that's less than 1 block from your house. You will have encountered more than that number of people on average. And therefore, everything after that, they're no longer actually people. Right? It's not that they're invisible, it's not that they have no value, but they're like dogs or cats. Right? They're not actually people. And so what you've described is effectively the same thing, right? If you want to make a connection, if you want to be a people person, then you have to figure out a way to not only make them people for you and your brain, but make you a person to them. And we don't do that by being, a representative of the business. That's an avatar.
Yep.
We do that by, making them people and being people.
And it's hard. It's hard for people to do it. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, right?
Has that translated for you into your leadership staff? Like, do you lead your direct reports and their direct reports in that exact same relationship-centric manner?
I believe I do. I believe I do. I try. I try. So I like to get to know who works for me.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I like to try to see, challenge yourself, try to remember everybody's kid's name. Because guess what? Everybody has a soft spot for their kid, right? So if you can talk about their kid and ask them, hey, how did he do in tennis match? How did he do whatever? You can start learning those facts. But it's funny what makes people tick, right? Because people got different hobbies. People got different interests. And if you can figure out what those are, you can get on that business, personal relationship.
The
Right?
problem with the philosophy is it doesn't scale. right?
Okay.
So I'm bringing Howard into an internal conversation a bit there, talking about maintaining large-scaled teams. So if you have a team of 1,000 people,
Okay.
you won't know 900 people's names, let alone their kids and their hobbies and their everything. So how do you take that relationship skill you have to that 1,000-person
Well, I
team?
see. I don't know that I agree with you because oddly enough, the CEO of this company I don't see very often, but when I see him, he always calls me by name.
It's a CEO skill. We've talked about that
And
before.
it's a CEO skill. So he's saying if you had 1,000 people, you're a pretty large organization. But I think you would groom your organization, your leaders within your organization. I think you would have to start grooming those leaders to have similar traits, right?
I also think you get into a situation where you're not actually remembering 1,000 people, you're remembering 1,000 facts, and anyone can remember 1,000 facts, right? So
But
I'm
it goes-
going to talk more about it, like how I cheat at it, because
Okay.
it doesn't come naturally to me.
It goes beyond that though, right? And we'll get into this when we have the conversation. But of those 1,000 people, 200 of them will be turning over at any one period of time,
Okay.
Yeah.
right? So big numbers, because in IT, 20% of your team's going to change. When it's 10 people that you're leading, not a huge burden to you. It's 2 people, you're going to learn 2 people's names. So there's 200 people you may have never met, let alone 200 people that you're going to see again. And yes, you're going to have a pretty big spectrum. You're going to have a decent leadership team. And I agree with you that your culture that you're going to create in a team is going to be very people-centric, very relationship-centric. And you'll probably hire people that also have that skill set. However, there'll be parts of your team members that don't have that skill set in any way, right? You might have 12 direct reports in a 1,000-person team, and 3 or 4 of them are going to be like purely technical, right? You wouldn't put them in a room with anybody other than themselves, right? That's the type of person they're going to be, and you're going to have to figure out how to still be effective at a much grander scale. I'm not taking away from the awesomeness of what you're saying.
No, I mean, and I get it, but you go back and so I get your point, but then you're also, it's a different generation now too, right? So what are the millennials, what are they looking for? It's not necessarily money. It's got money, but it's also,
Do I feel valued? Do I feel
yeah, exactly.
connection?
And how do you give them that?
And I'll be honest, it's not just knowing someone's name that makes the connection, right? But remembering a fact about them is infinitely more powerful. Okay, I can't remember your name.
I can't remember your
But I
name.
do remember that your kid plays tennis.
Yep.
So how did your kid do in their tennis match? I do remember you wore those spectacular shoes, right? What were those shoes called? Where did you get those shoes? Where can I get? Is that a pair of shoes you think my wife would like?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that. All of a sudden, they're a person, and it's not just they're a person to me, or to make me a person to them, but rather I now have value as a person because they remember something about me, and it's not easy to do that, right? But no one also expects you to walk up on their first day, right, and know all that. Nor do they expect that you're going to remember it, 2.5 years later. But you might walk up to them and go, you know what, I remember you, we had a conversation about, and then they'll tell you, and the way the human mind works, that will then trigger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's all easier on premise. Let's say you had 1,000 people here.
Sure.
Yeah.
But let's say that's in 17 cities around the world, most of which you'll never meet,
Okay.
right? Most of which have seen and know you because you're on screen all the time, right? You're doing the fireside chats. They will know you very well, but you won't know them at all.
Okay.
So now you've got to shift from this relationship person to a motivator, an inspirer.
I don't know because
a-
part of the relationship was establishing trust by being open. So if you're the leader on the screen
Yeah.
and you're open, you've already conquered one piece of it. Right?
Agreed. If you're entirely open, entirely transparent, there may not be the same words, right? And empower as much as you physically can. I agree. That's where a good portion of that inspiration is going to come from.
And I want to double click on trust,
Yeah.
right? Because empowerment is a function of trust. I trust you, therefore I empower. But it still is the same root. And if you cannot trust, you also will never actually empower. You may say you empower, but when it really comes down to it, you're going to double check everything. That's not empowerment.
Right.
Right, and so I do think it's critical to trust, right? And trust is a uniquely human trait, and trust is a human trait that is transitive. I trust you, you trust him, therefore he also trusts me, or I trust him, right? The transitive value of trust cannot be overstated. So when it comes to scale, all of the same things apply. You're never going to meet that team, but you'd meet their leader. Does their leader trust you and you trust their leader? And therefore, you have the value of that transitive trust. So when you do run into them, when they do ask a question, oh, I am already leading with trust because I trust your leader and your leader trusts you, and therefore I trust you. Right? Maybe not to the same level, but that trust still exists, and therefore you are a person to me, therefore you have value to me, you are the person your leader trusts to do the thing that you do, and therefore you have exceptional value to me because you're entrusted to do that.
And so if Carlos was here, he would say that leads into my question.
Actually, you would have some strange transitionary story that
Carlos would have a
probably wouldn't make sense in any way.
He would tell us about how warm it was in Florida currently today or something like that. So, which kind of leads into my question, because you talked about the 1,700 people or the people around the world. Do you have to be a leader to be the boss? So a lot of these qualities I'm giving you are leadership type qualities. Do you have to be the leader to be the boss?
Oh, I got a whole rant on it. You go first.
No, I pinned you. You pinned me earlier. You pinned me earlier.
My immediate response to that is anybody can be a boss because anybody can assign you to be that boss. Leader requires motivation, inspiration, to which a boss may or may not have that skill set. One of the bigger problems of a boss is that they're expected to be, and they expect themselves to be, the most important, the most informed, the most talented person on the team, when in fact a leader chooses the opposite approach. The leader presumes that they're the least effective person on that team, they have the least responsibility, and likely have the least skill set. Most people who report to them are smarter than them, right? They have more talent, they are more of a practitioner than the leader is. The job of the leader is to ensure that all of these people can come together to solve a problem, to move the needle on a particular project, to obtain a goal that the individuals wouldn't be able to obtain without the leader. It's kind of a distinct difference. So yes, anybody can be the boss, but very few bosses are really the leader itself.
And I'd have to say I agree with you, because a lot of times even in, a medium-sized organization, the best leader may not have any title. That they may be the informal leader, and they are the person who can absolutely drive the group and get things done. Mm-hmm. They may have a title, but they may not have the title.
Yep. The leader might be the second in command in the entire group.
Could be.
What's your rant?
I always start with Simon Sinek for this one, right? A boss has the title, the leader has the people. And I would argue anyone could be either, right? Leadership is not such a vaulted talent that it cannot be learned, right? You can learn to be a leader. It involves being inspired yourself to start with, right? Have you ever been successfully led before? That's question number one. It's going to be much, much harder if you have not. Mm-hmm. And if you desire to be a leader, you need to find leaders to follow, so you know what that feels like. And so you know how it feels to be inspired, and you know what inspires you and those around you. And those two are equally important, because I'm not inspired by the same thing that you're going to be inspired by or that you're going to be inspired by. Similar things for sure, right? There may be a speech given by a leader on a stage that inspires the three of us. But it's a speech. There's a couple thousand words. It's not likely that the same words inspired us in all the same ways to do the same thing, to hold us in the same direction. I would say the other thing a leader needs is vision. A leader needs vision. Where is the destination? And how do I take all these pieces that are very tactical and get high enough to understand their impact on achieving that vision? Right? My all-time favorite picture of leadership is Washington in the longboat crossing the Delaware. Right? Kind of everybody can see it once you know what it is.
Americans, but yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty famous painting. I'd be surprised if you hadn't seen it either. Yeah. You've seen it.
It's not a Sir John A. Macdonald or anything. anything, but that's
Sir John A. MacDonald. I love the Canadian reference. Because anybody else would have gone, it's not fucking Van Gogh. Like, yeah, okay, I'll admit it's not Van Gogh, okay? But not Sir John A. MacDonald. I like it. Now I'm going to have to look up who that is. But if you think to it, especially for the Americans in the audience, and if you're not, Google it. Washington has a specific position in the boat. There's probably 10 people in the boat. Where's Washington's position in the boat?
It's in the front.
Yeah, why?
Because he's the leader.
Yeah, but why is it important?
He's pointing the direction. He's telling them where to go.
Correct. And he trusts his people, right? He trusts that the boatswain's going to ensure that everybody's rowing together, and that everybody with an oar is going to row at the pace they need to, so they get to the direction they need to. He's not turning around looking. Probably didn't turn around and look once. He's trying to look for what can they not see because they're focused on rowing, guiding the ship, right? Holding a rifle and looking for snipers, maybe, right? Does Washington need to call out targets? It's possible. Does he need to consider, oh crap, were there rocks we couldn't see? Is this going to leave us exposed when we land? Do I need to adjust this because it's not actually the right target, right? And if this is the right target and that is a beach, what happens in those trees? Are there people in those trees? Right? Washington's focused on something that no one else is focused on because they're all focused on the task that they're given. A leader doesn't have everyone else's tasks. They have a completely different set of tasks. Right? And so yeah, they're in almost every room, they're the least important person in the room until it is time to lead, at which time they are the most important person in the room. And if that doesn't happen, they're not a leader.
right. Now, it is good that you can be a better leader. That can be learned from scratch, but it also can be learned as an improvement. I've had amazing failures as a leader over my career. I've made poor decisions. I've hired people that I thought were subpar because it made me look better.
I'm sitting right here.
Like I've had massive failures as a leader, but many of those has changed the way I actually lead, right? Many of those failures, and as Howard was saying, the successful leaders to which I followed, helped motivate and mold and determine how I look and lead teams right now.
Actually, I have to disagree with you. So I don't know that you can learn to be a leader. I think you can improve upon your leadership abilities, and you can read, and you've got things that happen in your career that changes, but I'm not 100% sure you can be a leader. I mean, that you can make yourself a leader. I think it's born. As crazy as that may sound. I mean, I think the true leaders are born.
How do you know that it's born? By which I mean, how do you know someone who's never been asked to lead or taken a stance on leadership has that innate talent, that innate ability, that unique flip of the DNA that says,
I don't think you
gene.
do. I'm not sure, because I think you could take a group of people, 10, and you could give them all the same materials to read, and I think one of them was going to stand out as the leader. I don't think the leader's completely learned. I think it may be learned from you as a kid. So I don't think it's DNA. I think it's what you went through. I guess that's one.
But is it situational? Yeah, so 10 people in the room, one of them, or 2 of them might become a leader, but the other 8 might be the best soccer coach, right?
No,
So
because soccer coach is a leader.
But they may also not learn that way.
Right.
There may not be room for them to lead in that room, right? You put one overpowered personality in a room and say, we're going to teach you leadership, and that one overpowered personality can run that room, regardless of the capabilities and potential of the other 9 people in the room. Right? I think that, and I get it was just an example, right?
Yeah.
You're not saying I did this before and those 8 people could never be leaders, right? But I do think that it's very situational, right? I do think, kind of to your point, I think there are people that from a very young age determine or are placed in positions that allow them to be leaders, and they grab onto it and they become leaders. I'm not sure they're effective, and I'm not sure that I'm going to use sports as the analogy, right? The quarterback is a leader on the field, has to be.
Yeah.
Football doesn't work otherwise. You can't have a quarterback who's not a leader and a team that is worth a damn. If you have another position that's a leader and the quarterback isn't, they might be okay, but they're never going to be the state champions. That person's never going to go to the NFL, right? Can we agree on that?
Sure.
Fundamentally? All right. So you can easily
As long as
say,
we're talking about CFL, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what CFL is.
Canadian Football League.
Oh, I see. So you could absolutely say at a young age, being a quarterback puts you in a leadership position. You did okay, therefore you're a leader, and that person can build on those skills. Doesn't actually mean they'd be any good at it.
And so then maybe
And
it's
then if
traits. Maybe it's traits like athletic talent. Maybe some people just have leadership traits,
Sure.
just like other people have athletic talent, and those leadership traits can then be trained to be great leaders.
Until you look at 10,000 hours. Have you read that book or seen or heard that theory? So effectively, there was some research done as to, I'm going to use one example, but there were a bunch. Why is Yo-Yo Ma so much better than everyone? Why is he the gold standard in Jello? There were a whole bunch of them, right? Olympic athletes, professional ball players, et cetera, actors, same thing. And the consistent determination was it is not genetics, but rather it is the dedication to 10,000 hours. That it takes 10,000 hours to reach mastery. Yo-Yo Ma has 100,000 hours, right? Whatever it happens to be, right? It's basically the 5-year rule, right? It takes 5 years of dedicated effort to become a master at any given thing. And the theory postulated in that what the book is supposed to convince you of is that because the only consistent thing is in fact the 5 years, is in fact the 10,000 hours, there is effectively nothing that cannot be taught and learned to an exceptional level, to the level of mastery.
So Paul could have been an exceptional NBA player if he would have just spent enough hours. It doesn't matter
Sure.
that he's only 5'4".
In fact, I was close.
But I mean,
I was
what
at
was
9,000. I just needed one more thousand.
Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
Wasn't Scottie Pippen like 5'6"?
No, he's like 6'10". You're talking about Spud Webb. Spud Webb was like 5'6".
I knew there was a basketball player.
Paul's even shorter.
That's better than
Paul's
I know,
even
right?
shorter than Spud.
That's sure.
That being said, everything you said I agree with. It's true. But the opposite is also true, where there are people that should not be a leader because they haven't learned the skill sets yet. But also people that choose not to be a leader, even if they have the skill sets. They just don't want to do it, right? It's not
Yes.
it's not something that they desire. Or maybe they're not in a position like we're in, they're more artists, right? They want to paint, they want to sculpt, they want to do music, and therefore managing and running a team is just simply not interesting to them.
Of course.
Yeah, or they want to be able to look at the output of their work and see something reflected in reality.
Yeah.
And leadership gives you zero of that,
Right.
right? Because my work is reflected in the work of other people, and there's no direct relation. I will never build a hot water heater,
Right.
not as anything other than a sick experiment. Like if we're being honest, right? Somebody could easily say, well, since you turned the plant, we're going to have you assemble a hot water heater. Cool. That's not what I mean.
Right.
That will never be my purpose, and I will never get the satisfaction of that having been my purpose. And there are plenty of people that need to do that. I do think it does need to be made clear there's nothing wrong with that. And search for whatever it is that makes you happy, right? Search for your own version of success. For some people, leadership is part of it, right? And for some people who go into leadership, it will never be part of it, and they will leave leadership. And I think that's also fantastic, right? The journey is so much more valuable than the destination in all these cases. That I do think, try it, right? Experiment, see what, Leadership was not something I thought I would like at all. I really liked being an individual contributor. And I still find great pleasure in being an individual contributor. It never occurred to me that that was something I liked until I was kind of thrust into it and went, well, I guess, I kind of suck at this and I don't really understand people very well. Maybe I should figure it out because it's thrust upon me, right? All of a sudden I have a team of 10, I gotta do something,
So an interesting I read an interesting article the other day. So Tom Brady, no, he wasn't in the CFL, but you know who Tom Brady is.
Yeah,
So
familiar.
considered the greatest of all time from a quarterback perspective in the NFL. Been in the league X number of years, 44 years old or whatever. There was an article, and basically this 6th-round draft choice wide receiver got picked from Tampa this year. He walks into the room, Tom Brady comes up to him, introduces himself, and tells him how much he enjoyed watching his film. And it just jumped out at the guy going, this guy's the greatest of all time, and he's coming to talk to little old me who wasn't even drafted very highly and looking forward to working with me. That's a leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's knowing a person. So he took the time to invest to learn these facts. And it's back to the, in IT and business right now, we're trying to gather data. So it's all about data and understanding the data, right? It's the same thing. That's what you do with your relationships. It's all about gathering data and information and using that data to develop the relationship. So
For me, leadership wasn't a choice. Like I was a mediocre student and a mediocre individual contributor. So
So you're saying your options were
I
limited?
clearly wasn't going to be the best at those things,
so you
right?
just got lucky.
Like there's only so much programming I was willing to do. So what was my next step, right? I better take a management job, so at least I don't have to do the actual work.
If you can't do teach.
So yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what the process was. And you go up through the hierarchy and you do less and less work, right? And eventually you sit here and podcast.
Yeah. Excellent.
Excellent. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. I think this was a really, really good, solid, 40 minutes.
I enjoyed it.
So we'll, since I can't see the screen and didn't set a timer, because,
I hope you look forward to watching and listening to this podcast.
I will. You will have, I promise you will have more listeners to this podcast because I'll be telling everybody. Hey, go listen
get
to
your
this.
family together.
Oh, yeah. We'll have like a podcast viewing.
Take that and we'll put that in the podcast.
That would be hilarious. A
The show
reaction
notes.
video.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation, and we'll see you on the next podcast.